Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the channel. Yeah, talking more Steelers today. And now that it's the off season, we're going to be doing more and more of these, similar to last off season, which started around draft time. I said, and you know what? Some of you I owe an apology to, because before the season started, I said I was going to try to do at least one of these shows a week, with all of the coverage and stuff I do for work in terms of the sporting news, SB Nation, doing my national pod. I just didn't have time for it, so I apologize if that was something that some of you were looking forward to, in terms of like weekly shows just based around the Steelers. I think a lot of that would have led to a burnout for me. I was getting very close to that near the end of this year. And not to complain about my job or anything like that. I love my job and I'm very grateful to have it. But now that the off season is here, more speculation stuff. I mean, we spent an entire off season talking about Brandon Ayuk last year. So now from January on, we're going to be doing a lot of these. So if that is your cup of tea in terms of Steelers talk, be sure to subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. And today we're talking quarterbacks, which I'm sure we're going to be doing a lot over the next 2 months before the new league year starts in March, when the Steelers can figure out who their quarterback's going to be. They're going to get that figured out over the next few weeks, but won't be able to make it official until mid-March. And there's a lot of names floating around in terms of potential quarterbacks for the Steelers in 2025. And we'll just go through some of them today. So again, if this is your cup of tea, Steelers fan, subscribe to the channel, like the video, do all that fun YouTube stuff, and let me know who you think they should make their quarterback in 2025 in the comments. So let's get started. We'll start with the obvious two, right? Russell Wilson. He said in his final media availability for the Steelers during cleanout day that it's his plan to be in Pittsburgh, but Nick Farbaugh didn't. There's been no sort of negotiations with Russ on that happening. My immediate reaction to Russell Wilson is no. And nothing against Russ. Any sort of, the brief interactions I had with him during minicamp OTAs, he was very cool, very cordial, just very nice with the media. What you would expect from Russell Wilson, the guy. Seems like a very cool dude. Played really well at first when he came in relief for Justin Fields. Had a really nice Jets game, a really solid Giants game. Obviously, that Bengals game where he threw for over 400 yards. And that was great. But the last 5 games of the year really came crashing down. And, I know that they didn't have Pickens for a few of those, but Russ didn't play his best games either. And I just wouldn't feel okay with the Steelers giving, a 36, 37-year-old another look when there's no – we saw what the ceiling is with this team. If they just decide, hey, we'll just run it back, then it's just saying, yeah, we're cool with how that just went. We're going to do it again. So my immediate reaction to Russell Wilson is no. In large part because if you had to choose between the two quarterbacks that are currently on the roster, who would be the starter next year, I would absolutely take Justin Fields. For a couple reasons. One, he played well in the first 6 games that he started this year. 10 total touchdowns, only 1 interception. Had his bumps, especially like in the early parts of the Colts game. And then against Dallas, put them in position to win. He gave them the lead late in the fourth quarter, and then the defense allowed Dallas to march down the field and win the game. So with Fields, we kind of know what you're going to get, right? He's going to make a lot of plays with his legs. He's not going to be as productive as a passer as you would have, as Russell Wilson proved to be, especially in the deep passing game. But I do think that an entire offseason, knowing that he's the starter, planning around him, building around him, and getting him more weapons, right? where it can't just be George Pickens and a flock of C plus D minus guys. Got to get a legit number 2. Calvin Austin proved to be a tremendous player in the slot. That's great. You'll still have him. And Pat Freiermuth will be a reliable safety blanket, but got to get him more weapons. The offensive line, like the young offensive line, played really well, and I fully expect them to replace Pat Meyer this coming offseason because he's been a dreadful offensive line coach. So Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick, both rookies, had tremendous years in the interior. He's still got Isaac Samalo that's going to be there. We'll see what they decide to do with Broderick Jones. I highly doubt Dan Moore comes back. He's going to be a free agent. He played very bad down the stretch. So if you can put these things around Justin Fields, then maybe they can run it back to the playoffs and maybe win a playoff game. Again, that's going to be kind of best case scenario for me at this point, is just win a playoff game. Until they prove they are capable of doing more than that, then that's going to kind of be their ceiling right now. And if you want to remain competitive, which reports coming out, they're not going to move on from Mike Tomlin, so I assume that's still going to be kind of their goal here. That I think Fields is the right move, just because if he does play well, then maybe you have your quarterback of the immediate future and give him a Baker Mayfield-esque deal. Maybe not 3 for 100, but if you were to go 3 for 90 with incentives, 3 for 85 with incentives, something in that realm. And then if he begins to struggle, you can always draft somebody as well. So it's kind of a no-lose situation here. Again, they're not going to be a Super Bowl contender next year unless something insane happens. So you got to go into it with that level of expectation. And again, if they want to still be competitive and see if Fields is the guy to be the long-term starter, then I think that's a good idea. And one way or another, it will accomplish something if you bring in Fields, or keep Fields in, I should say. He either proves that he's the guy or he doesn't, and you draft somebody in a expected to be loaded 2026 draft class. So if I had to pick between Fields and Wilson, I would absolutely pick Fields. Now let's get to some exterior options. One of the more popular ones, Sam Darnold. Played really, really well with the Vikings this year, led them to a 14-3 record. What is this? That's 37 touchdowns on the year for Sam Darnold. Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt, just a resurrection year from him in Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell did a great job with him. The only thing I worry about is that is this system going to suit Sam? And my immediate reaction is no. And I think that for certain quarterbacks, it's okay to say, like, the talent is there, but they need certain kinds of coaches, certain systems, certain things around them to be able to succeed. And with Sam, he's not a guy where, you could put a Patrick Mahomes anywhere, you could put a Josh Allen anywhere, you could put a Joe Burrow anywhere, and they'll find a way to make it work. That's not what Sam Darnold is. He's not an elite quarterback. He had a very good year, but that doesn't all of a sudden make him one of the best quarterbacks in football. And so with how stuck in the past the Steelers are, I don't think that Sam Darnold in Pittsburgh, with the current system as it is, with the lack of weapons, I don't know if that would work. I know a lot of people will be excited if he does end up in Pittsburgh, and fair enough, especially, a quarterback who just had that great of a year. But how many times have we seen, a guy have a one-hit wonder year, get a big deal, and flop? And I hope that wouldn't happen, obviously, if the Steelers were to get Sam Darnold, because, I'm a Steelers fan and I would want him to succeed. But at the same time, I would have a lot of doubts about it working, just because Arthur Smith had a very nice start to the year and just crashed and burned at the end of the year. I just don't think that this would be a system that would help Sam Darnold succeed. So, again, I would hope to be wrong, but I would prepare for the worst with Sam Darnold. All right, let's get freaky. Aaron Rodgers. We know about the mutual respect and admiration that Mike Tomlin and Aaron Rodgers have for one another. Anytime Rodgers is on McAfee and he can talk about Mike Tomlin, he seems to do it. And it's all but guaranteed that the Jets are going to cut him loose and he will be a free agent this coming offseason. So, and by the way, like, say what you want about Aaron Rodgers, and I have. but I still like him. I know that's probably not like a popular opinion for some because he has some. He's an interesting guy, but I'm pulling up his numbers right now. I probably should have had him in front of me to start. And even though the Jets had a bad year, it's not as if Aaron Rodgers had a god-awful year himself, statistically speaking. So if we look at his numbers from this year, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, little less than 4,000 passing yards. And then threw 4 touchdowns in the season finale against Miami. So he showed, he said one time a down year for him is a career year for others. I mean, if the Steelers had a quarterback this year that would have given them that kind of production, maybe they win more games. Maybe they win a playoff game. And again, I'm not here to say that Aaron Rodgers is still 4-time MVP Aaron Rodgers, but, still a middle-of-the-pack guy who, outside of the dumpster fire known as the New York Jets, could probably find some sort of success. And in a place like Pittsburgh, maybe he can. Again, same situation with all the other 3 guys we talked about, and it's going to be the same with the rest of the guys we talk about as well. You got to get help. Because we saw Aaron Rodgers without any help at the end of his Green Bay era, and we saw how it ended. And so you got to get somebody other than George Pickens. And look, maybe you just trade George Pickens. Maybe you trade him for a 1 or a 2. You draft a wide receiver. You sign. You make a strong push for T. Higgins, and you draft a guy. If you're able to accomplish that, then that is a big net win. You sign T. Higgins and draft, a Mecca from Ohio State or Elick Ayamanor from Stanford. If you can do that, then yeah, you'll be in a great position for any quarterback. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about the receiver stuff, so I'll try not to harp on it too much here and focus on the quarterbacks. But in terms of Aaron Rodgers, again, the level of production that he put up will fly under the radar a little bit because the Jets had a bad overall season. But he put up good numbers. So with Aaron Rodgers, could it work? Maybe. He's also going to be 42. So you got to take the age into consideration. This isn't going to be a long-term answer. In a lot of ways, it would just be similar to the Russell Wilson thing, just with a little bit more maybe media chaos. So it's one that I would probably stray away from. I wouldn't be like shaking my fist at the sky if they were to bring in Aaron Rodgers. But one where I wouldn't see, a Super Bowl imminent. Maybe they can win. They don't, but it's not one that would, I don't think I would feel one way or the other about it, honestly. One that I am absolutely against is Kirk Cousins. I banged the Kirk Cousins drum last offseason, and I'm glad that they didn't listen to me. The Achilles ended up being much more than I expected it to be for a guy who's, not all that mobile to begin with, but it clearly impacted him in terms of the Falcons didn't want him to move. They didn't do hardly any play action stuff, any bootleg stuff, which he was very good at before the injury, and it impacted him. It impacted his ability to drive the football. So they are all but certainly going to just release him, and he'll become a free agent. It's one that I would stay away from personally, for all the reasons I just pointed out in terms of the injury worries. And look, maybe almost, a year and a half after the injury, he gets a little bit more confident in himself and is able to move a little bit better. I've always liked Kirk. I thought he's always been one of the more underrated guys in the league. He's won playoff games. He's had really tremendous seasons in the league. So always been a big Kirk guy, but I just don't think that we're going to see any of that high level play from him anymore, unfortunately. So, maybe he goes somewhere like Cleveland. I think that's probably the place that makes most sense to him. Him and Kevin Stefanski were together for a little bit in Minnesota, and he's not going to be worse than what Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston or Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Bailey Zapp were for them. So I think Cleveland is where he ultimately ends up because of the connective tissue with him and Kevin Stefanski. But personally, in terms of a Steelers fit, I don't think there's one there. Another one, Geno Smith. Yeah, Mike McDonald has been very odd when it comes to the Geno Smith conversation. He was asked if Geno Smith was going to be their quarterback next year. He's like, well, he's still here, so I guess I'll say yeah. I was like, all right, dude, way to show like a complete lack of faith in your quarterback. And look, I'll say this about Geno Smith: all the film nerds love him because he throws a pretty deep ball, and when he's dialed in, he can fit the ball into some pretty tight windows. But he also makes a lot of dumb mistakes, specifically in the red zone. And Geno Smith isn't a guy who's like a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, in my opinion. Um, he's a guy who has talent, and his story's incredible. Going from Jets hopeful answer, franchise quarterback, long-term backup, bouncing around the league, finally getting a chance to start again and taking full advantage of it. Great story, and I like Geno a lot. He's fun to watch when he's dialed in, but I don't think that he would be somebody that would lead the Steelers to the promised land. I wouldn't be against them bringing him in, but I think that we would see a lot of discourse if this were to happen about, oh man, Geno Smith's a great quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. And I think a lot of people would get a little bit too far ahead of themselves, talk themselves into Geno Smith being great, and they'll end up doing what they've done the past few years, going 9-8, 10-7, maybe getting to the playoffs, maybe winning a playoff game or not. I don't think that he would raise the ceiling of this team all that much. And again, it's nothing against Geno Smith. It's just that, every year, and I saw somebody tweet this the other day, and I can't remember who. I never remember who when I see things. I just remember the point sticking with me. Every year people talk themselves and they're being like 12 like really good quarterbacks in the NFL, when in reality at any given time there's like 5 great quarterbacks. And Geno Smith has been one of those guys where people just get like, again, and it's a lot of like the film guys and whatnot. They just get like a hard on for a deep ball that he throws against the Saints, and it's just like, oh man, he's great. Oh no, he's good. He's definitely like at minimum an above average quarterback, but at most, the 13th best quarterback in football. And we saw, like I said, a lot of decline from him when it came to turning the ball over in the red zone. The Seahawks kind of fell apart late. So it's not one that would get me particularly excited, but it's not one where I'd be like, oh no, Geno Smith. I think I would put it in the same tier as like Aaron Rodgers, where, all right, yes, he's younger than Aaron, but still a guy in his mid-30s who isn't going to be the long-term answer. And it just feels like they're going to continue just doing this cycle over and over if that's the move. One that I think is flying under the radar a little bit, and this will be the last one that we talk about today. Dak Prescott. The Cowboys and Mike McCarthy parted ways, which is going to open up a potential big addition. And I'm not saying that like, I'm not reporting this or anything, but I could 100% see a situation where Jarrett, a big splash move, a big flashy move for a new head coach, and he calls his old buddy Deion Sanders and offers him the head coaching job, and Deion says yes. And then in the process of that, he'll come out with his son and say Shedeur will not play anywhere except for the Dallas Cowboys. They draft Shedeur, and in the build up to that, they trade Dak Prescott. And if Dak Prescott becomes available, the Steelers should be all over it. Say what you want about Dak and the playoff woes. He's got more playoff wins than the Steelers do since he came into the league. He's had a lot more playoff success than the Steelers have since he's come into the league. And you're not going to find a quarterback that becomes available that is as good as Dak. Maybe ever. In terms of like being able to trade for, that's probably the height of a guy you're going to be able to trade for. At least in the foreseeable future. You could probably throw, if you want to say a name like Justin Herbert, I would love Justin Herbert. But in reality, I just don't think that they're going to move on from him. I think Jim Harbaugh clearly loves Justin Herbert. I don't think they're going to move on from him. He had a bad playoff game, but he also has nobody worth a piss that he's throwing to outside of Ladd McConkey, and that finally came back to bite him. He made a few bad throws. I'm not saying that all of those picks were on the receivers, but Will Dissly dropped one directly into a Texans hand. There was a ball that went through Ladd McConkey's hands into the hands of a Texans defender. So, I would love to have Justin Herbert as a Steeler, but I just don't think that that's realistic. And the Dak one might seem a little bit far-fetched, but if there's any team that would do something like that, it's Dallas and it's Jerry. And like I said, if he offers Dion the head coaching job and Dion takes it, they will do whatever they can to get Shedeur in a Cowboys uniform. At which point it would make no sense to really keep Dak around, even though they just paid him, and they would have to do a lot of stuff cap-wise to see what they can do to eat it and, get around that. But if anybody would do it, it's Dallas. And if and when that would happen, then the Steelers should be all over trying to acquire Dak Prescott. I think that this one, like I said, this is the most outlandish and probably has the least amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? The least likely to happen. I don't think that there's a 0% chance that it happens, though. There might be a very small chance, but I do think it's greater than 0. Just because, again, that's what the Cowboys do, is just really outrageous stuff. That's what Jerry Jones does, at least. So I could see that happening. And again, like I said at the beginning of the video, let me know who you think the Steelers should bring in to be their next quarterback. Any names that I didn't say that you might want to throw in there, any names that I said that you agree with, that you disagree with, let me know what you think in the comments. And like I said at the start of the video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Not just Steelers stuff, but my podcast, The Pump Fake, that I do with some of the biggest names in NFL media. My buddy Matt Verderan from Sports Illustrated, Mike Tanier, Aaron Schatz, frequent guests on the show, my buddy JP Acosta from SB Nation. You will catch every episode right here on this channel. You can also listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. But if you just want to come to watch the Steelers stuff, that's more than okay too. So I appreciate everybody for watching. I will see you soon to talk more NFL, more Steelers. And again, I appreciate you for watching. Have a good day.